Hey people, how's it going? So on today's video, we are going to be talking about My City and Giggle Fests over here. My City and Giggle Fests. So we just finished a game, 3 games, 1 chapter of My City Roll and Build. Not roll and write, roll and build, people. So we're going to go ahead and tell you a little bit about the game and then get into what we thought about it, what our likes or dislikes, just a quick, just what we think about the game. So yeah, Sarah, will you go ahead and explain the game to us a little bit and then get into your thoughts?
I sure will. So we are talking about My City Roll and Build. This is a game from Kosmos for 1 to 6 players. It takes about 20 minutes to play. This is the second in the series. The first one was just called My City, and it was a board game. This is My City Roll and Build, so it's like a roll and write style version of My City, the board game. This is a legacy game, so that means over the course of the game you're going to be writing on things, you might be destroying things. In some legacy games, it doesn't look like it's going to be in this one, but in some legacy games you might put stickers on cards or the board or that kind of thing, and the game will change with every single game you play. So there are going to be some spoilers for the first 3 episodes of this game. So if you would like a spoiler-free approach, probably go away, go watch one of our other videos, and then come back when you have played through or when you want or you don't mind a spoiler. We are only going to talk about the first chapter of the game. That's episodes 1 through 3. And it's called The New Land. So without further ado, let's talk about that. You get this really thick pad of all these different score things. Now, there's a bunch of different ones in here because we are going to be playing different chapters. Like I said, the chapter 1, The New Land, is episodes 1 through 3. So if you flip this up, you're going to see the first page that everybody gets. This is chapter 1, episode 1. And the way that it starts out is pretty similar to the board game. We have a map that looks almost identical. If I remember correctly, this is like identically the map. Maybe there's a few more trees, but otherwise this looks pretty similar. The river, the rock formations, the forest, and everything look pretty similar to the board game. And this is, like I said, this is chapter 1, episode 1. So this is like the very first game that we're going to start with. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to place polynomino shapes, or like Tetris shapes, on this map here in order to cover up as much as we can. However, there are some sort of conditions that we want to work around, right? So when we're finished with the end of an episode, and I'll talk about that more here in a minute, when we're finished with the end of an episode, we're going to score for several things. We're going to score for trees that you can still see, so trees that haven't been covered up with a building. So you can cover these trees up with buildings if you want to, but for every tree that's uncovered at the end of the game, you'll get a point. So you probably don't want to cover up the trees unless you really, really feel like you have to. But you'll lose points for every rock that is uncovered at the end of the game. And these are all 2 rocks. So like this is 1 tree, that's 2 rocks. Which means I might need to adjust my scoring for some of the earlier games because I just remembered that these count as 2 rocks. Okay, so and then you'll also lose a point for every empty space that you have left that doesn't have trees or rocks or some kind of mark in it at the end of the episode. What's going to happen, and this is a little bit different than the board game, what's going to happen is every turn of the game, any player is going to roll these dice right here. Let's pretend I rolled something a little different this time. And then with these 2 blue dice, we're going to meet these half circles to make a Tetris shape. So this one here is just like a little baby L. If I'd rolled differently, it would make a different shape. This one here is like a C. And you do that as many times as you need to make these different shapes to fill up your board. The way that it works is we have to start adjacent to this river here, and you can flip this shape, you can mirror it, you can rotate it, but the whole thing has to fit within the confines of the board, and you cannot cross over the river. So even though this is like 2 spaces, I couldn't put one here and then the second one here because that would cross over the river with 1 building. So I'm going to draw this 2 square shape somewhere adjacent to the river for the first one. And then every shape I draw after this has to be adjacent to another shape that's already drawn on the board. And this die tells us how we're going to shade in the shape that we made. So for this one here, we would want to do 2 squares like right next to each other, just like this, and they'd have to be fully shaded in. There's also this like hash mark one and the X's. So we would throw these dice, we would draw a shape adjacent to the river, we would throw the dice again, we would make a shape with the dots, like so. Now we would make a square. We would draw a square somewhere on our board adjacent to something we've already drawn with the hash marks, and we would just keep going. At any point, if you decide that you don't want to or you can't draw a particular shape, you can choose to cross off one of these circles right here. If you do that, you're going to lose some more points at the end of the game, but it can help you if you really are strategic about how you place. Refusing to place a particular shape can be very helpful. You can also, instead of refusing to draw this shape or not being able to draw the shape and crossing off a mark to be able to continue to play the game, you could just quit the game. So you could say, you know what, I'm mostly filled in. I'm probably not going to be able to fit very much more on my board. I'm just going to quit now. And in that case, you don't have to fill in one of these bubbles and you just stop. But then for the rest of the game, while people are throwing the dice, you don't get to add anything else to your board and you have to calculate your score based on how you've done. I'm going to show you my first game board so that you guys can kind of see what it looked like. And the first time that we played, we didn't really realize that you had to build your buildings so that you could tell what they were. We just thought we could like add all the land types together. So this was how we played our first version of the game, our first episode of the game. After episode 1, they introduced a little bit of new content, and I learned that we should draw distinct buildings. So I improved a little bit for episode 2. And what they added for episode 2 was, before we were just trying to fill in as much of those blank spaces as we could while covering up as many rocks as we could and maybe hopefully not covering up trees. But in episode 2, they introduced a new scoring mechanic where we scored our largest contiguous grouping of each type of the different kinds of houses that we could draw. And these are all supposed to be, I think this is like residential maybe, and then this is like industrial, and this is, I don't know, retail maybe, something like that. Anyway, so in this version, when we're trying to make large groupings here, there's extra points for that. So you see I've got a bunch of my hash mark buildings all together, trying to make that a big group. I've got all my X's grouped together, and then I've got all my solids grouped together. And then this guy over here, he took up space, which did prevent me from losing points, but because he's not with this group here, he doesn't count towards that. So then after episode 2, we moved on to episode 3. And in episode 3, we were still doing the same things we were doing before, trying to cover up empty spaces, trying to cover up rocks, trying not to cover up trees, trying to get groupings of our buildings. But we also introduced a well in episode 3. And like I said, this is very similar to the board game. This is, as far as I remember, this follows exactly how the board game went. But in the board game, we put a sticker on our board. Now, in episode 3, when the well is introduced, we're told that if we can surround the well on all 4 sides with 4 different buildings, we will score an additional 4 points. So in this game, we were focused on filling up as many spaces as we could, not covering up the trees, covering up the rocks, getting the groupings of buildings, and then trying to cover up the spaces around this well with 4 different buildings. If you wanted to, you could cover the well with a building, but then there's no opportunity to score those 4 points for the well. So these 3 episodes make up Chapter 1, The New Land. And what we did was we scored at the end of episode 3 of Chapter 1, we added up all of our episodic points for all of Chapter 1. And I do need to go back and check because I don't think I took off enough points for my rocks over here. But essentially what's going to happen is each chapter of the game, we will sort of have like a chapter winner. So in addition to having a game winner for each of these games, with all 3 of these games, now we have a chapter winner. And then at the end of the entire campaign, which I believe is 12 chapters, we will have like a campaign winner. So lots of ways to win in this one, whether it's if you won an individual episode or you won a whole chapter, or maybe you win the entire campaign. As far as I can tell, except for the dice, this is pretty similar to the board game. There's less going on here because in the board game we had stickers and things like that. So we had this board as represented by this piece of paper here, but it was actually like a board that we had in front of us. And we would add stickers to change the board. So like where they just printed a new thing that had this extra icon here, in the board game, we all added a well sticker to our board. So it feels pretty similar to the board game version, except that the dice are definitely different, because what happened in the board game version was there were polynomial or Tetris-shaped pieces, physical pieces, and you would actually, there was a deck of cards that indicated which piece everybody had to place on their board. So we'd turn over a card and it would tell you the red baby L building. So everybody would find their red baby L building and then they would start trying to put it somewhere on their board. And it did have to follow all the same placement rules as this. You had to start adjacent to the river. You wanted to cover up rocks and not cover up trees, and you wanted to group the like buildings together, and you wanted to build 4 different buildings around the well. So all of that was similar, but instead of drawing the shapes, we were actually physically placing Tetris-shaped pieces on the board. So we've only played through the first 3 episodes, or the first chapter of the game. I did mark the spot. Here's the second chapter. I haven't looked beyond this because I don't want to ruin anything for myself, but this is going to be chapter 2, episodes 4 through 6, and it's called The Churches. That's also following the board game. That was the second chapter for the board game as well. So I suspect that we're going to just kind of continue on the same sort of trajectory that we went through with the board game as we play through My City Roll and Build. But it does feel significantly different because of these dice instead of the card deck telling us which pieces to place. And these dice are really clever. So you, like I said, when you roll the dice, you just meet up the gray semicircles to create the shape. So this creates just like an infinite amount of, well, not an infinite amount, obviously, but just a huge amount of possibility for which shapes you might form as you are rolling these dice over and over again. And there's a few things that will change over the course of the game. Like right now, we don't know what this means. So as we play the game, eventually this will mean something to us. But if we roll this result right now, we just place a little 2 out and just completely ignore this. But as we're rolling, we're making all these different possibilities here. And I thought that that was really clever that they used these dice to sort of form all of these different shapes that we could see. And it's totally random. And that's a really, I think, in my opinion, that's a very clever way to make Tetris shapes. I am a little curious to see if the whole thing follows the board game as closely as the first 3 episodes did. If it does, to be honest, I don't think I'll be that impressed. The board game is really fun, and I really enjoyed playing through the campaign, but I was kind of hoping that this would be something similar, but different enough to make this worth doing. And the dice, while they are different from the cards, so far, nothing is significantly different enough from the board game that this is really exciting or compelling to me. I do think it's a little easier to play and probably quicker because there's so much less. In the board game, everybody had, I don't know, more than a dozen pieces, polynomial pieces. Yeah, a lot more bits. So everybody had a bunch of their own private polynomial pieces that you would place on your board. Plus everybody had a board. Plus there were cards and there was other stuff going on. And this is literally just these 3 dice and 1 sheet of paper and you're playing a game. And a pen, obviously. So I think that this is probably a lot easier, a lot faster, a lot more convenient to play than the board game was. But we have only played through the first 3 episodes. So I don't know. We'll kind of see as it goes. Probably I've been sent copies of both the board game and the roll and build from the publisher, so I did not actually have to pay for these. But I suspect that this one is probably quite a bit cheaper as well. So like I said at the beginning of the video, I really like legacy games. So I'm excited to kind of see, this one doesn't feel as much like a legacy game as it does a campaign game, because in legacy games, there are those elements where you're like introducing new materials, not just new mechanics, but also like new physical elements to the game, and you're destroying things and you're altering things permanently throughout the game. And this just doesn't necessarily feel like that. It feels like, okay, yeah, we'll play several episodes and each one will be different from one another, but it doesn't seem like we're going to be like permanently altering the game state or like, introducing new game materials or anything like that. So I don't know if I really feel like this is a legacy, but at the end of it, maybe I'll feel differently. I think it was fun. I think it was accessible for what it is. I really think these dice are very clever. What did you think, Nick?
So with this game, I think it is a lot quicker to play than My City. I think there's a lot less bits to deal with. And the big thing I took away from playing My City Roll and Build from the board game My City is you have polyomino pieces in My City. You know how many polyomino pieces that there are and that could come out, and how many of a certain type of polyomino piece that could come out. Our first game had like 6 or 7 small L's like almost in a row, but they were all different types. It was just like it kept small L. So you could roll a lot of the same polyomino shapes. So you're not guaranteed the certainty that you are in My City. In My City Roll and Build, you could keep getting the same or similar. You could even like very rarely see some pieces or some polyomino sets. But I do like the dice. I think the dice are interesting and it gives a little more uniqueness to the game. But honestly, like Sarah was saying, it doesn't feel too different from the other yet.
And we don't know that it will change. It may not get any different. It may just follow the board game pretty closely all the way throughout. But we've only played the first 3 episodes, so maybe it will get different.
Yeah. And another thing I kind of like about it is you get a piece of paper, you get the dice, you get a pen or pencil, and by the way, pencils can erase in the game. For some reason in the rules, it was like, and pro tip, pencils can erase. I'm like, yeah, no doubt.
I do think I was making fun of that because it says in the rule book there, it's like tip, ! If you use a pencil, you can erase. And I was like, oh, yeah, duh, that's what pencils do, right? But so I did kind of make fun of it at first, but then I started to write something and I was like, okay, fine, because I'm using a pen, it's fine. But I was like, okay, yeah, well, if you started to draw a shape when you actually have like a polynomino shape in your hand, like a tile, then you can kind of like see how it might fit. But if you're actually drawing the shape, once you start, then like, unless you're using a pencil and can erase it, then you gotta deal with it.
Yeah, but then there's no like min-maxing or was analysis paralysis. You start writing it, it's like, oh, okay, it's there. I can't erase it.
There's still analysis paralysis or min-maxing, which is minimizing/maximizing, where you sit there and you figure out what's the minimum number of points you could get versus the maximum number of points. Tends to slow the game down a lot, no matter what game you're doing it in. And if the game mechanics don't prevent people from doing that, then it's something that someone can sit there and do, where they either min-max, trying to figure out how to get the most points, or they just think, overthink, okay, what if I did this? What if I did that? What if I do it like this? What if I do it like that? And I still think you can do that in this game, but as soon as you start writing, then you have to stop doing that. So it's not like it prevents min-maxing or like I don't know, overthinking. It's just once it's late, it's played. Once you start writing, then you got to keep going.
Yeah. So, but if if it ends up that they're kind of similar games, I don't know. I think I might recommend the My City Roll and Build, just only because you can play a lot faster. You can play.
I don't know. I might say if you really like Legacy, if it ends up that it follows really closely, I might say if you like Legacy games, for the Legacy aspects of a game, go with the board game, because it doesn't feel like right now.
Campaign,
there's
probably.
nothing more. There's literally nothing else in this box. There's this fat pad of paper that's got all the different chapters and episodes and stuff like that. There's a rule book we haven't looked through all the way because at a certain point, like, I don't want to look ahead and spoil things for myself. So there's a rule book, and then there's these 3 dice. There's nothing else. There's no stickers. There's no insert to look under. There's like there's a bag for the dice. That's literally it. So there's no way that they can introduce anything new to this game, as far as I can tell, that will make this what I feel to be like a genuine Legacy game. It's a campaign game for sure, but I think that this, to me, isn't going to feel like as much of a Legacy game as the board game. So if you're looking for My City, the Legacy game, for the Legacy aspect of it, I might say go with the board game. If you're just looking to experience like a campaign version of polynomial placement games, then sure, do the roll and write. Nick is right. It is faster. It's easier to get to the table. It's easier to pack up. You could travel with this game much more easily than you could the board game. But if you're looking for like the Legacy feel, I'm just not sure that this is going to give it to you the same way that the board game would.
All right. Well, my lights are giving out on me on my. I didn't charge it, I guess. So we'll leave it at that. That was My City Roll and Build from Reiner Knizia and Kosmos. Games Kosmos. It is for 1 to 6 players, 10 minutes. It takes 20 minutes to play. So yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Hope you guys enjoyed it and play games. Bye!